got two illustrious folks here on the stage, and I hope it won't be discourteous if we begin with the younger of the two, Senator Paul. Most people in this room are not in the U.S. Senate, so tell us, what has it been like for you your first month? Anything surprise you? Anything not surprise you?
I think the biggest surprise has been how much influence we are all having immediately. And I think it's important, the crowd here, Campaign for Liberty, the Liberty Movement, it's important because that's how I have a voice, is because of you. They know you're out there. They know the Tea Party's out there. And so we have a much bigger voice than one person ever could have imagined to have.
Well, that's good. We're all pleased to hear this. Now, Congressman Paul, what's it been like having your son in the U.S. Senate? I understand you share an apartment in D.C. Does he stay up late? You got to tell him to keep down that racket. Like, how does that work?
Well, so far he's been doing all the chores. And he's been I have to say he's had a little better experience coming into the Senate at this period of time in our history compared to going into the House back in the 1970s. You weren't there. Nobody had invented you yet. So there is definitely a difference. There's a difference as Rand sees it. There's a difference for me now compared to even 3 or 4 years ago. I thought maybe we would be, talking things over all day long and have a lot of time to spend together. But I was just kidding around a little while ago. I said, this job is almost as tough as medicine. I mean, we're up early in the morning and late at night, but we do get to visit mostly in the morning. I guess we're too tired by nighttime. First my name goes to bed. But it's as far as I'm concerned, it's a great arrangement. And of course, the media made a lot of fun of it, but that was okay too. But in good taste.
Well, the funniest thing was that there was a cartoon that said that should we have a grocery list? And of course, Ron Paul objected because that would be central planning. And then the cartoon concluded by saying, "Well, Dad, it's time for me to pay my rent." And he said, "Well, it better be in gold and silver."
Well, future possibilities are endless here. Now, I understand that both of you have books coming out later this year. Maybe you might care to preview them for us. Tell us what are they called? What are they about? Senator Paul first.
Well, mine's going to be really good. And I had help with mine, and the help is on the stage. And Jack, I think, has a copy of it. Jack helped write the book. It's called The Tea Party Comes to Washington.
Yeah, Congressman, my book is called Liberty Defined. Lately there's been a lot of people wanting to define liberty. They want to define the Tea Party movement. They want to define what we all believe in. I thought, well, maybe I have a chance. Maybe I can say what I think it's all about. So I have given my personal opinion on how you define liberty, and I go over 50 different subjects. So it's easy reading.
We're talking about the progress, or kicked off this little chat here about the progress this movement's made. How much pleasure does it give you when you hear in the mainstream media, particularly in the conservative media, talk radio, people use the term Keynesian economics like it's a cuss word? Have you noticed that? It happens all the time now. Don't you take a little bit of pleasure in seeing that come about?
Well, I certainly do. And I went back on one of the interviews. They said, "Who is this individual that you dislike the most in Washington?" They wanted to be a political battle, like, "Oh, this Obama's a bad guy." And I said, "The guy that we have to really cancel is this Keynes guy. He's been with us way too long." It's Mises, Hayek, and Rothbard against Keynes, and right now we have the momentum.
Now, Congressman, I'm not going to ask you the elephant in the living room question. I've been forsworn to ask this. They'll never invite me back. I'm not giving up this gig. No, but although last year I cornered you by asking what would be your reasons for not doing it, and that was a tricky question. I'm not going to go there. But my question, though, is let's treat this as a hypothetical. Now, let's imagine you are a 2012 candidate, and you're people are, on some issues, trying to sound like you. So everybody's upset at the Federal Reserve, everybody's upset about the spending, even Mike Huckabee is upset at the TSA. How would you, see, I mean, if I were you, I would be so tempted up on that stage to say, look, who on this stage has a better record on spending than I do? Raise your hand. Who? But I know that we have different styles, but how would you, how do you distinguish yourself from a crowd? They're all going to sound like they're budget cutters. How do you stand out?
Well, you know, I found out last time that one of the comments made afterwards, I said, why did you think I sounded different from the other one? And the most common answer was, and it was very flattering, I said, it sounded like you were the only one that's telling the truth.
How do either of you feel about the prospect? Let's suppose a Republican candidate is elected in 2012 who is the sort of middle of the road and not very much changes under this person. How do we prevent, I mean, again, I don't want to think in pessimistic terms, perhaps a wonderful human being will be elected, but suppose this outcome occurs, how do we prevent all this great sort of, you know, anti-government Tea Party revolt spirit from being dissipated because people say, well, one of my people is in now. I mean, how do you keep the flame going? That's a tricky question for either of you.
Well, I would say that, you know, what I said throughout.
All right, who's the saboteur?
What I said throughout the campaign was that the Republican Party is an empty vessel unless we imbue it with values. So the political parties don't really mean anything unless we give them value. But a committed minority can really give value to a party and tell it and help it believe in something. And I think that as we move forward in the debate, that's where I think we're already having an influence is, you know, there's a Democrat proposal up there. The president says he'll freeze spending at 2010 levels. And that adds $4 trillion in debt. The Republicans have another alternative which adds $3 trillion in debt. So we have to, I think we hold their feet to the fire and we become that very vocal minority that says we want better. But we can have an influence and maybe it's in 2012 we get to decide who the nominee is.
Swinging in your first couple weeks as a senator. You came out with these bold proposals. $500 billion in cuts, which is pretty bold, as we just said. Now compare that to the Pledge for America, or whatever they call it, which was only $100 billion. They couldn't even live up to that. I think it's at $32 billion now. Like they can't even get that far. You're setting a standard for what a serious budget-cutting conservative Republican should be. You were talking about the party has no value unless we imbue it with value. Do you see that happening to the level of $500 billion in cuts? Do you see any support?
Yeah, but I think it's different who you talk to. If you talk to the 87 new freshmen that have come in, I think they're much more eager for more significant cuts. They can have an influence on the leadership. The leadership, the problem is, for example, like on raising the debt ceiling, the leadership capitulated from the very beginning and said, we have to raise the debt ceiling. Instead of saying, even if you're going to do it, we should have significant budgetary reform. And so they got nothing out of it because everybody knows it's a foregone conclusion. They're going to vote to raise the debt ceiling. So we got nothing out of that. But I think the freshmen are much more cohesive and we have a much better chance there.
Things have definitely improved, and I am optimistic that our votes are going to be better. For instance, we had at least a token victory this week with the help of 8 freshmen in temporarily defeating the Patriot Act. But I try to be realistic, and Rand works real hard at being optimistic, and sometimes, that's a challenge. But I am optimistic that things are doing better, but I'm not very optimistic that we have the people in Washington, like you said, if we have 1 or 2 people, what's going to happen? We just don't have a vote. I see it as momentum. The momentum against us has been there for a long time, and to change that momentum is a horrendous job. But where I look for the positive side is your momentum. Our momentum is building. Our numbers are growing. The enthusiasm. And even academicians are getting recognized these days. What's going on, I think we will win, but I don't think we're going to... I don't want to discourage Rand about always everything, but the budget's not going to be balanced, and unfortunately, they're not going to cut much. The Republicans, they said 100, and it went down to 40, and they said, well, we had to cut here, and then they increased 2 or 3 things. They actually increased in this proposal. So that could be pretty discouraging. So we need to have you keep pressure on everybody, and we'll have to do a lot with your pressure on the members, the new members. They might have forgotten some of their pledges that they signed on to. So let's not let them forget them. Right.